This is not a symbol for the signing. This, my dear friends, is a warning of what is to potentially come next season. João Pedro, the aggressive individual, picked up one of these bad boys last season. Jackson elbowed someone in the head, studded someone in the leg, picked up two of these bad boys. And Liam Delap, don't think I've forgotten about you, picked up 12 of these in the Premier League last season. The card collector, the leader last season. So I asked for aggression. I asked for animation. I'm getting it. These guys are cooked. These guys are ramped up on testosterone and aggression. So hopefully they toe the line. Take it very gently. VAR exists. But let's toast. Let's toast, ladies and gentlemen, to the fact that Alejandro Garnacho will not be playing for Chelsea Football Club because we've signed two left-sided attackers in the space of 24 hours. So he simply won't be here. There is just no space. And I know you're looking for regular game time to play in the World Cup with Lionel Messi, so why would you want to join? We'll talk about Gittins tomorrow. So, this man goes by the name of João Pedro, 23-year-old Brazilian forward. He got 10 goals and 6 assists last season. He got 9 goals and 3 assists the season before. Around about 22 starts, 23 starts the season before. Played for Watford prior to that. Decent sized profit for Brighton in the old switcheroo 2 seasons after getting him. About 4 or 5 seasons of first team football. Fairly experienced at this point. But this is Winstanley's man. Paul Winstanley strikes back after Joe Shields gets 2 man in this window, Gittins and Delap. The fight for Egbali's love, I guess, goes on. The Apprentice, the final 3, Joe Shields, Lawrence Stewart, Paul Winstanley, 10 p.m. BBC One, one of you will be fired. And the reason why I say that is because, listen, there's no secret that I am on these directors' necks, and for good reason, because I feel like they should be held accountable with the money spent and how they spend it and how relevant said signings are 6 months or even a year later. João Pedro is the player we're discussing today, and João Pedro is a player that I like. I want to say that very early doors. I think he's very sound and secure technically. I think he's very good or good at everything, not necessarily elite at anything. And I think he'll end up being a squad player, but it all depends on many variables and factors, but we'll get into that. Because initially, when I spoke about this player about 10 days ago, I was quite confused because I obviously, when I was speaking about bringing in a Brazilian to father Estevão and Santos, I was more talking about Rodrigo. But they've sent me a different Brazilian. Maybe I didn't specify. Maybe I wasn't making myself very clear. But João Pedro has made more sense now because of Maresca's kind of versatility experiments that he's kind of shown us in the last couple of Club World Cup games that actually makes the targets and the signings that we're going after and have already secured make more sense. Because initially when I was looking at this play, I was thinking, when Stanley's just phoning a friend, he's got a question, landed at his doorstep, phoned a friend, João Pedro's in the contact book, networking, relationships, easy as peasy. In comes João Pedro. But why? And loads of people will be asking outside of Chelsea, why are you making this signing? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's understandable because we have signed players in the last year that have been irrelevant 6 months later or have not been able to break into the team or be trusted by the manager in the Premier League. But João Pedro is a player that, with Maresca's newfound formation of a 4-2-2-2 or even a 3-4-3, what I deem him to be, which is a left 10 / a second striker, basically Christopher Nkunku, the Premier League version, I guess. He's better at some things than Nkunku, maybe Nkunku's better at other things. But that's what I deem him to be. And, you know, we have a history here. We have a trauma. We have the question, what is this player? Is he a 9.5? Is he a 10.8? Is he an 8.7? Is he a second striker? Is he a left 10? Is he a false winger? Is he a fake 9? What is he? It's one of those players that they don't necessarily have a position. They kind of play in zones. They drift out and into zones. And maybe some of you are sick of that because, I mean, we haven't got great history in recent times with Havertz, with Nkunku, with Felix. So I understand the kind of worries and concerns. And I guess the danger is that if you don't play this player regularly enough, then confidence drops, and it's all well and good talking about what they are like at their best, but what is this player like at his worst? Because even Christopher Nkunku clearly still has the quality. We saw that in the last couple of Club World Cup games. He actually looked really good in his actual position. Not when he's misprofiled and played up front. Not when he's almost disrespected and playing in Conference League against Astana and Djurgårdens. When he's meant to be on the cusp of making a French World Cup squad before the injury in the first season at Chelsea. Of course, motivation levels potentially will dip. Not necessarily had the press and intensity. That's what Joao Pedro brings to the table. More strength, more press, more intensity than Christopher Nkunku. So, obviously, like I said, we've seen 2 new formations and Joao Pedro clearly fits into both because that 3-4-3 that we saw in the last game, which is kind of maybe a carbon copy of Thomas Tuchel's Champions League winning team. You had Neto right wing back. You had, Cole Palmer in the left playmaking position alongside, Delap up front, Cucurella wing back. You had Enzo as well, vying for like a double 10 position. Joao Pedro plays potentially in those twin 10s. He plays just behind the striker. He plays as a second striker. He links up and lines up with Delap when he crashes the box. Joao Pedro, for me, when I've watched him, his strengths are carrying the ball, dribbling, connecting play, linking midfield to attack. Not in the same way maybe Enzo Fernandez does it with his passing range and his passing variety, but he does it in a way where, like I said, he goes past players or he'll carry it, he'll dribble, he'll bring it forward, he'll progress it. He's a progressor. So for me, you've got to make sure that position is actually real. It actually exists. And that's where Maresca is going to have to maybe continue to show the experimental side of him, the unpredictability, not just rigid 4-2-3-1 high and wide wingers, because I don't feel like Joao Pedro is a high and wide winger. I don't feel like Joao Pedro is even the striker we're looking for. When you look at the goal tallies that I read out earlier, it's not a prolific striker. It's not a striker that's going to get you 20 goals. Hasn't even hit 15 goals in the Prem. So this is not a player that you want to rely upon for goals. This is a team that seems to be constructed this summer, not only to improve the physicality floor, make it a bit more of a stronger team that isn't going to be bullied. And I really do appreciate that because I mentioned it at the start of last season. This team has to play a certain way. They're going to be light on their feet. They're going to be having to play on the floor. They don't really have any physicality. They don't really have any strength. Now, that's not to say Joao Pedro, one of the things that do disappoint me with him is that he's not great in the air. For all of the, like I said, the extra physicality that he brings, the extra intensity that he'll bring in comparison to Nkunku, who was, and Joao Felix, who are, deemed as lazy and weak. He doesn't have any real aerial threat. Just like, Liam Delap, they look like they have potential for aerial threat because of the frame, but they haven't really shown it in the statistics and in the numbers. So we should hopefully improve in these areas when the ball goes out wide and comes into the box in open play. We should get more aerial goals, but there's no guarantee like an Osimhen. So that's a concern. That's a disappointment. But like I said, if we're playing with twin 10s, if we're playing with 2 strikers in a 4-2-2-2, and we're playing with, Joao Pedro next to Liam Delap, or Jackson next to Delap, or Jackson next to Joao Pedro, that suits, I think, everybody involved. When you have a strike partner, that takes the load off, that takes the weight off. Now suddenly you can occupy 1 defender. You don't have to occupy 2. You can make runs in behind if somebody else holds it up. You can hopefully develop some sort of chemistry and understanding, yin and yang. So that's what I hope to see. That's what I hope to look forward to. Because Maresca has shown those formations. Now, to continue with those formations, I think we need, of course, an overlapping left back. If you're going to play Joao Pedro on the left, you definitely, for me, need an overlapping left back. Could it be Cucurella? Yes. Could you get someone better than Cucurella to go high and wide and take on their, opposing fullback, or to whip in, better crosses or etc.? Yes, I think you could get a better attack-minded left back than Cucurella. I do prefer Cucurella to almost be part of the defensive 5, tucks into midfield, deals with transitions, has that bite, that grit, nastiness to his game, counter press, win the ball, dog, But if I want someone technically gifted, attacking, I think we can get someone, and we need a left back anyway. So if you're going to play him over there, I see him as really tucked in. If you're going to play him, which is what we saw in the 4-2-2-2, to be fair, we saw tucked in playmakers, wide playmakers. If you're going to play him in the, in the second striker role, then okay, that makes sense. And if you're going to play him as a twin 10, okay, you can make that make sense. And if you're going to be back up to Palmer, then you better pray that he is professional and he's able to stay committed, and he doesn't need necessarily runs of games to keep confidence. And he can come in as an impact sub and change the game when we need a goal with 15, 20 minutes left. He can come on and kind of add to the team. There's super subs in history for a reason. Chicharito, if you remember him at Manchester United, there's players that come off the bench and impact. That's their role. They do it really well. And there's some players that need the rhythm. They need the consistent game time. They need the match sharpness, back-to-back games to feel confident, to develop the chemistry of the other players, etc. I don't know if Joao Pedro can change and be that impact. Let's see. But he may well have to, because of course I think he'll be a squad player. I think his aim should be 10 goals, 10 assists. That's the kind of player I see him as. He's someone that will create for others, but also I'd like to think that if you're crashing the box, which all of his goals last season were in the box, he needs to be able to go in that, box with Delap or whoever the other striker will be, Jackson, etc., and bring goals to the team. So these systems, are they dependent on, obviously if Neto plays wing back, if James is trusted to overlap Palmer, if we sign an overlapping left back, we'll see what happens. I think in terms of Ikatike as well, who we were linked with, and we're still linked with Kudus, who obviously would now, for me, spell the end of Madueke, because Kudus is someone that could play maybe in Neto's high and wide position, but also come and play as a twin 10 as well, in Palmer's position, or Enzo Fernandez's position. So he's someone that makes more sense now, because I've seen these formations play out in the last couple of games where we've actually used inside forwards, or twin 10s, or whatever you want to call them. But if you're getting someone like Ikatike and you're still thinking about Ikatike, for me, and I said this on a video that never came out because we never moved for Ikatike, so there was no point putting it out, but he's got to be a replacement for Jackson, because Joao Pedro, when I looked at the numbers, his shot volume, the amount of shots he takes, is not very high. He doesn't take many shots, whereas Ikatike takes a lot of shots. And aerially, he looks like he might have a bit more potential as well. And he just acts like a striker a lot more than Joao Pedro. He thinks like a striker a little bit more. Still has all the playmaking, still has the dribbling, the close control, the kind of fluidity, the chemistry to kind of 1-2 and connect with others. But I feel like there's more of a goal scorer in Ikatike than there is in Joao Pedro from what I've watched. So I'm still very much interested in Ikatike, but that means that Jackson's got to go. And if you're bringing in Kudus, that means Madueke's got to go. And Nkuku and Felix definitely have to go now that you've got Joao Pedro. Even though, Nkuku's looking good and he's starting to contribute and he looks happy with the winner there, still probably got to go, right? She can't keep all these guys. We've got a lot of attackers, and Sterling's back home as well, kicking rocks, kicking his feet up with Renato Vega. So, there's plenty of players, Chilwells and whatnot. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I do appreciate that Chelsea have added in this window to the physical side of the team, while still, for me, probably trying to keep the technical level base where it is. I don't think Joao Pedro is much better technically than what we already have, but I think physically, that's where he's going to make a big difference. Same with, you could say, with the Gittins maybe as well. We'll get onto that tomorrow. So yeah, but overall, to sum up and to wrap up, I'm interested in this because I like the player, like I said at the start, but I'm also aware of the fact that we have to make this make sense in terms of we have to get the best out of this player. He feels like a system player. I don't see him as a maverick. I don't see him as someone that is just guaranteed to bona fide work for us. We have to actually make it work. We have to make sure that we play him in a position that makes sense for him, where we get the best out of him, and then it can go down as a really shrewd signing at 50 million plus add-ons, where you've actually looked in the Premier League for someone that was talented, technically really solid, but you've actually propelled them and elevated them. The worst case scenario is he becomes irrelevant. He doesn't really contribute. He doesn't really see many minutes because we revert back to the 4-2-3-1 with the high and wide wingers. He sits on the bench. He doesn't really add enough goals, doesn't really add enough assists. And the way we've put the attack together, everybody's got to contribute, but that also leaves the risk for nobody contributing. So we kind of put ourselves in a position where if anyone gets injured in the attack, theoretically, we should be able to still score. We should be able to still look exciting and play well. But because you don't actually have a guaranteed bona fide 20 goal a season man in that team, outside of what we saw Cole Palmer do, then you are running the risk that nobody actually does anything. And the assists don't get converted and etc. Everybody's underperforming their XG or whatever, So that's what we're at. He's a player that's very good at everything. I don't think he's elite at much. That's how it feels when I watch him. And in between the lines, and hopefully we make it make sense. Obviously, Cole Palmer's going to be taking pens, so you're not going to be getting those goals. Joao Pedro has been getting loads of goals off the penalties. You're going to have to up your open play goals. Whether that's in the air, on the ground, left foot, right foot, from out wide, cutting in. Shots inside the box, you probably need to develop getting goals from outside the box as well, if I'm being honest. You just need to try and get them wherever you can. I'd like consistent 7 out of 10 performances, though. That's what I want. There's a world where Joao Pedro, at his very best, is incredible. At his very worst, is awful. I just want steady steady 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. If you can just contribute to a winning team, play your part, play your role. I'm not expecting stupid numbers. I'm not expecting key player in terms of like indispensable, undroppable. I'm just expecting somebody that comes into the system, a cog in the wheel, somebody that just contributes and is effective as he can be. And then obviously all of the intangibles like the work rate, the counter press, all that kind of stuff helps. When Chelsea are at their best, they counter press really well. Someone like Joao Pedro adds to that. The more energetic this team is, the better it is on the counter. If he can make the right decisions as well when we're breaking, if we can break a little bit more, these are all things that will go a long way. So yeah, but this is the kind of signing you do get under Enzo Maresca to wrap. You know, you've got a player that you know he's going to follow instruction, hopefully. You know that he's not hopefully got an ego to him. You know that he's going to fit into the system that you're kind of setting up. And are you being backed? Yes, you are being backed because coincidentally, it's not a coincidence, you know who is above you and you know who is downstairs as well. You know all the players that are coming through, you've previously coached them, and you know the directors, they're going into their phone book and they're getting players that they know that they've worked with. So it's by design. It's not by accident that you're being backed, because they know exactly who you are and you know exactly who they are. And really everything should be in unison. Everybody should be should be singing from the same song sheet. If you're not, then it's Poch 2.0. So you should all be in alliance. You should all be in agreement. And then it's just down to we win. You win. Make sure that what you're doing is to win. There's no Christopher Vell. There's no PSR from last summer. There's no excuses. These are the players that you guys actually want to sign. You're not forced into swap deals. You're not financially stricken. You're getting Club World Cup money through the door. You're getting hopefully a big sponsorship from being in the Champions League. You're getting gate receipts because there will be a full stadium on a Wednesday and Tuesday night instead of a Thursday in a second leg against Legia Warsaw. Money is coming through the door, and this is how you're choosing to spend it. So you've got to make sure that it works. Otherwise, like I said at the start, one of you will be fired. Minimum. So, guys, that's how I feel about Joao Pedro. Very interesting player. A player that is almost Christopher Nkunku has jogged, if you don't want to say run. Or no, you can say Christopher Nkunku walked so Joao Pedro could run. Maybe that is the case, because the system is very similar to what Nkunku needs to thrive, although it seems too little too late for him. So, yeah. 50 million, like I said, like the player, but make sure it makes sense. And yeah, system player for sure. Got to make sure we get the best out of him. There's attributes there, but they're all good, very good. Let's see if we can make some of them elite. Let me know what you think about the sign in the comments down below. Until next time, big up your damn selves in a bit, people. Peace.